Welcome to our latest project. Today we're building an exchange rate calculator, a simple yet powerful tool that dynamically fetches real-time currency conversion rates using the Fetch API. In this project, you'll learn how to make HTTP requests to a third-party API to get live exchange rates and then display them directly on the page. We'll start with two currency selectors. By setting one currency to USD and another to EUR, the calculator will automatically update the conversion rate. Want to convert a different currency? Just choose a new one from the drop-down and you'll instantly see the updated exchange rate. You can even swap the two currencies with a single click to see the reverse rate. This makes it incredibly easy to check conversions for any pair of currencies. We'll guide you through using the free exchange rate API, sending requests, and passing the JSON response to update the DOM. Plus, we'll cover how to utilize the Fetch API, the JSON format, and more. Make sure to subscribe to our channel, watch the full video to follow each step, and don't forget to like and comment for the source code. For more amazing projects, check out our full playlist. Let's dive in.
All right, so we're going to get started on our HTML for the project, and in the file structure we just have our index, our script, our style sheet, and then I have an image folder with this money PNG, which you can get in the resources of this section, or you can get in the GitHub repository. So let's go ahead and generate a boilerplate here, and the title will say exchange rates calculator, and we're going to link our style sheet, and then let's link our script. The source is going to be script.js. Okay, so we're going to have the image at the top, and I'm going to give this image a class of money-img, and for the source it's going to be img/money.png, and then let's have an h1, and we'll say exchange rate calculator, and we're just going to put some instructions here. So choose the currency and the amounts to get the exchange rate. And then underneath that we're going to have a class of container, and inside here we're going to have a class of currency. Now inside this currency class we want our select list and we want our input. So let's do a select, and this select is going to have an ID of currency-1, because remember we're going to have two selects, because we need one that we're actually the country we're choosing, and then the country that we want to get the currency for. So in this select we're going to have just a whole bunch of options. So I'm actually going to grab those and paste those in, and you can grab them from the repository if you'd like. So it's just a bunch of options with country codes here, and I have the USD selected by default. Of course you can change it to a different country if you want. So right under the select we're going to have an input, and this input is going to be a number. So it's going to have the type of number, and we don't need a name. The ID is going to be amount-1, because remember we're going to have two amount inputs. The default placeholder will be 0, but I'm going to put an initial value of 1, so it'll just be $1. Okay, and now we're going to have another currency class with pretty much the same stuff in it. So I'm going to grab this div, this currency div, everything in it as well. So that ends right here, right before the container ends. And then we're going to go down here and paste this in, and this is going to be currency2. And then of course we don't want USD selected, because this is the country that we want to get the exchange currency for. So I'm going to choose, and feel free to choose what you want. I'm going to choose euros. So right here, let's do this. Okay, and then here where we have the amount, this is going to be amount2. We're going to grab on to that in the JavaScript, and we don't want an initial value here because it's going to get generated in the JavaScript. And then right in between the two currency classes, so right here, we're going to have a class of swap rate container, and this is going to hold a button to swap the rates. So let's say button, we'll give it a class of btn, and let's give it an ID of So right here we're going to have a class of rate and an ID of rate to grab onto in the JavaScript. And there's nothing's going to go in here that's going to be generated dynamically. So that should be it for the HTML. Let's save that, and we're going to go ahead and open this with live server, and that's what it should look like. Okay, so it doesn't look too great. So in the next video, we're going to just style this real quick with some CSS. Alright, so we have our HTML complete. Now we're going to do the CSS, so I'm just going to make this smaller so you can see both at the same time. And we can close up our HTML and go into our style CSS. And first thing I'm going to do is set a variable for our primary color. So I'm going to say on the root scope, we're going to have a primary dash color variable, which is going to be that light green, the same green that's in the image there, which is 5FBAA7. Okay, so we'll use that in a few different places. We're going to add our reset, our box sizing property with border box as the value, and then for the body, set the background color to light gray, F4 3 times, and we're going to display flex, which will automatically align everything horizontally, which we don't want, so let's set the flex direction to column to put that back. Okay, don't worry about the image for now. And then we're going to align items to the center, so align horizontally, and then justify content center, which will align it vertically, but we do have to have a height, and that's going to be 100 viewport heights. Okay, so that puts everything smack dab in the middle. So I forgot the font, so let's add a font family, and I'm just going to use Arial, Helvetica, and then under the height, let's just take away the margin. And then I'm going to add 20 pixels padding on the body just for really small screens, just so there's some spacing and it doesn't go right up against the edge here. Alright, now the H1, I'm actually going to give that primary color, so we'll use our variable here, custom property, primary color, and paragraph, I want to just text align that to the center. Button, so BTN. The button is going to have white text, and the background is going to be the primary color. Bar, color, save that, good. Let's see what else do we want to do. Let's make sure the cursor is a pointer, and let's also add a border radius of 5 pixels, give it some rounded edges, and I'm going to set the font size to 12 pixels, and then let's add some padding. So we'll do 5 top and bottom, 12 left and right. Okay, and that should be good for our button. Now the image here is a little big, so I'm going to grab the money image class, and let's just set a width of 150 pixels, make that a little smaller. Alright, now next thing I want to style are these, basically this right here is a class of currency, this is also a class of currency, and then we have the select list and the input inside of it. So let's say for the currency class, I'm just going to do padding 40 top and bottom, which will just move everything away, and then I want to display flex just to make sure everything is aligned correctly, and we're going to align items to the center, and then let's do justify content, and we'll use space between, which will take the remaining space and put it between. Now for the select list, so this right here, we're going to style this, so currency select, and let's add some padding, so 10, 30, 10, 10. Now if I save this, notice there's no difference on a Mac. There's basically a default appearance, and we need to remove that. So we're going to add the prefixed version here, so moz-appearance, and set that to none. And then also we want to do the WebKit prefix as well, and just appearance, none. So we'll save that, and now you can see we get that padding. Let's see, so for the border, let's do 1 pixel, and we're going to make it lighter, so it's going to be 1 pixel solid, and then for the color we're going to do DE 3 times, okay, which will give it a much lighter border. Let's see, what else do we want to do here? Let's make a font size 16 pixels. Okay, make that a little bigger. Now I want to have an arrow image here, and we're actually going to use an SVG for that. So the SVG you can copy from the GitHub repository. So we want to set background transparent first of all, and then we want to set background image to URL, and then we can paste in the SVG, which is this here. Obviously I don't expect you to type this all out, so you can get this from the GitHub repo. Now if I save this, we still can't see the arrow image because there's a couple other background properties we need to add here. So let's do background position, and we're going to say from right we'll do 10 pixels, let's say top 50%, and then 0, 0 like that. Alright, and obviously that is not correct, so in order to fix this we're going to add a background size property of 12 pixels, auto, and 100%. Okay, and right now it's repeating, we don't want that, so let's say background repeat, and let's set it to no repeat. And there we go, we have our arrow. Okay, and it should look the same no matter what platform or which browser you're using. Now the input here, obviously we have to style that as well, so let's say currency input. And for this we're going to actually remove the border, so we'll say border 0 and set the background to transparent, and we're going to make the font size bigger, so let's say 30 pixels, and we want to text align to the right. Okay, so there we go, and you can't see the the border or the background anymore, which is what I want. And then in here, you can't see it right now, but we will have the rate here. It'll say like 1 USD equals whatever euros. So we want to style the swap rate container and the rate, which is the thing we can't actually see yet because that's going to get generated with the JavaScript. So let's say swap rate container, and all I want is for this stuff to align horizontally, so we're going to say display flex and align the items to the center and justify the content, and we're going to use space between. Okay, and then for the rate, which we can't see yet, but I'll just add this anyways. The color, I'm going to use the primary color variable. Okay, and then let's add a font size of 14. And the padding is going to be 0 top and bottom, 10 left and right. Alright, now there's a couple things I want to do. I want to remove the outline. So right now if I click the button or the select list, you see this ugly outline. We want to get rid of that. So that's on the focus state. So we'll say for any select that is in focus, input, focus, and also button focus, we want to set the outline to 0. Okay, so that way we don't have that anymore. And then I just want to change the width of the of currency to make it a little more responsive. I can't make this any smaller, but if it was, this would just stay at this width. So what I'll do is I'll add a media query. So we'll say @media and say max width. So on 600 or less. So if the screen is 600 pixels or less, then we're going to take the currency input and we're going to set the width to 200 pixels. Okay, so that just kind of pushes it in more. So that way, if the screen is smaller, you know, it'll be less width. You can see it change right here when I get to 600 pixels. All right, so our UI is complete. It's not, I mean, it's not the fanciest UI in the world, but I think it looks decent. So in the next video, we're going to start on our JavaScript. We're going to add some event listeners. We're going to interact with this exchange rate API so that we can get our rates. We'll get back some JSON data. We can insert that into the DOM and so on. All right, so we'll get into that next. All right, guys, so in this video, before we get to actually adding our functionality, I want to go over JSON and I want to go over the fetch API. Okay, so fetch is used to make HTTP requests to either your backend, if you create your backend where you're dealing with a database, maybe it's written in Node.js or PHP or Python or whatever else. A lot of times you will make requests from your front end, which is what this is, the client side, to your back end to get your data. You can also use third-party APIs, such as the one we're using here, which is the exchange rate API, which basically has an endpoint that we can hit, and we can pass in here as a URL param. We can pass in a currency, and then what that'll do is it'll give us a response. Using the fetch API, it'll give us a response with all the countries and their exchange rates. And then we can use that data in our application. So very, very helpful. Now, like I said, I just want to kind of go over this stuff before we build the rest of our application. So I'm going to create a new file here called items.json. Okay, because before we make a request to the API, I want to just make a request to a file, because we can do that as well. And I just want to quickly go over JSON. So a JSON object is very, very similar to a JavaScript object. We basically have key value pairs inside of curly braces, except with JSON, the key and any string values are going to have double quotes. So let's say we have an ID. We can put 1. We don't need double quotes around the number here because it's a number. And then let's say we want to have like text, and we'll say item 1. Okay, so this is a JSON object, very, very simple. And then we can have JSON arrays, so basically arrays of objects by putting this inside of brackets. Okay, and then we'll just go ahead and create a couple more of these. So we'll say item 2 and 3, and then let's just change the ID here. Okay, so this is a simple JSON array, and this is similar to something you might get back from an API or from your back end. So what I want to do now is open up my script file, and we're going to have a function called calculate. We're going to have this in our actual script, but for now I'm just going to use it to give you an example of making a request. And we're just going to make a request to that items.json file. Okay, so like I said, fetch it's built into the browser, so that it's not like we have to use a CDN or install it or anything. So we can just say fetch. And then in here, if we're making a GET request, because there's different types of HTTP requests, when you just load a web page or you're just getting data from a server, typically it's going to be what's called a GET request. If you're posting data to the server, meaning you're filling out maybe a form where it's going to be saved to a backend database, that would usually be a POST request. If you're updating data on a server, it would usually be either a PUT request or a patch request, and if you're deleting something off the server, it would be a delete request. And if that's all new to you, I don't expect you to know all that right now. You don't need to know most of that for these smaller front-end projects, but just to let you know. So if we're making a GET request, which is what we want to do here, because we're just getting data, we can just put items.json right in here like that. Now if we wanted to make, let's say, a post request, we could put in an object here instead. I'm sorry, we would put not instead, we would still put items.json, but we would add some options along with that. And one of those options would be a method, and the method could be post. Okay, we could also send headers. If we wanted to send headers, we could create an object and send like the content dash type, and we could set that to a content type like application/JSON. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of other things as well. I have a crash course on YouTube on the Fetch API, and if you're not really familiar with it, I would definitely suggest watching that as kind of a supplement to this course. All right, so this is just going to make a GET request. We don't need to add any other parameters or options. And what this does is it runs asynchronously, meaning it runs kind of in the background, and it returns a promise. When it's done fetching, it'll return a promise, and the way that we catch that promise is with .then. Okay, we just tack on .then, and this will give us a response, and this actually has to be a function, so you could do this like that. However, I think arrow functions are much cleaner, so we can take that away, use an arrow, and we don't even need these parentheses because it's just one parameter. And then I'm just going to do a console log, which is a single expression, so I don't even need that. I can just simply put my console log in here of whatever res gives us. So let's save that, and let's open up our console. So this is the initial response from items.json, and it's a readable stream in the body. And then we have headers, which we don't have any. We have the status, which is really important to understand this if you're getting into, especially if you want to get into back-end web development. So basically, this is the HTTP status code. 200 means okay. It means everything is successful. The whole 200 range, like 201 and so on, it's successful, but they might mean different things. For instance, 201 means successful, but it also means something was created on the server. So if you inserted a blog post into a database and it was successful, you might get a 201 back. 300 range is redirect. 400 range is a user error, like let's say you forgot an email in your form and it's, an email was required, it would give you a 400 back. 500 is a server error, so if something happens on the server side, then you get the 500 range. Okay, so 200 means good, and that's what we get back here. Now notice the data itself from items.json is not here. So with the Fetch API, it's a little weird. You have to actually take this response and then format it to what you want, which in this case is JSON. So we want to say res.json like that, and then we get another promise back. Okay, and just to make this look a little neater, a lot of the times what we'll do is put each .then on a separate line. Okay, and then this will actually give us the data back, so we can go ahead and console log the data. And you can call this whatever you want. You can also call this whatever you want. Just make sure you use it over here correctly. So let's save that, and now you'll see we get the actual items back. We get our array, our JSON array from our items.json file. Okay, and we could do whatever we want with this. So, I mean, this is just an example. I'm not going to keep this, but let's say we can do document.body, which is going to just select the body from the document, and let's say inner HTML equals. We could take data, which remember is an array, so we can choose the first item. Okay, we use the 0 index, and it's an object, so let's grab the text value. So if I save that, now what we've done here is we've called calculate in our JavaScript. We've fetched items.json, and we specified that we want it to be JSON, and then here we got the data back, and we just basically replaced everything in the body using inner HTML with that first item's text. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. So I know that, that's not an in-depth guide on the Fetch API and JSON and so on. So I would highly encourage you, if you don't already know this stuff, I know a lot of you do. If you don't, check out the Fetch API crash course on YouTube. I also have a JSON crash course if you want to get deeper into that. So everything in this course that you use, but I don't go over in depth, I most likely have a crash course on YouTube about that particular thing. Okay, like I said earlier, this course it's made to just build some cool projects. It's not like we're not going to go in depth on everything. I also have my modern JavaScript from the beginning course where we do more in depth studies and stuff like that. All right, so now that I've explained the Fetch API and JSON, in the next video we're going to continue, and we're going to add some event listeners here because obviously we need some stuff to happen when we for instance, change the value or the country. So we'll do that next. All right, so now you have at least a decent idea of what JSON is and how the fetch API works. I'm going to just delete this items.json file because it's not actually part of our project. And now we're going to jump into script.js. Now we need to fire off some events and we need to select some DOM elements. So we need both of these select lists. We need both of these inputs and the swap button. So let's start to create some variables to grab that stuff. So let's say const, and I'm going to call this variable currency. Let's do currency element underscore 1. Okay, it's just what I'm going to use as a naming convention here. And let's use document dot, and since everything is in an ID, we'll use get element by ID. And we're grabbing currency dash 1, which is the ID of this right here. Okay, and then at the same time we need 2, so let's call this one currency element 2 and currency 2. We also need the amounts, so let's actually copy this down again and we'll call this one amount element 1. Change this to amount 1, which is this right here, and then we want this, which is amount 2, so we'll copy this down. This is going to be amount element 2 and amount 2. Okay, and then in addition to those, we need the rate, which is, if we look in the HTML, this right here, so it has an ID of rate. There's nothing in this, we can't see it displayed, but it will be right here. We can actually close that up. So const rate element is equal to document dot get element by ID rate, and then let's grab the swap button. So we'll say swap equals document dot get element by ID, and that has an ID of swap. So that's all of our DOM elements that we need. So this calculate function is going to be very important. So this is going to be called basically on everything when we select a new currency, when we change the amount, and so on. So what this is going to do is fetch exchange rates and update the DOM. Okay, and then we're running the function here. So we're running it to begin with, and then we also want to create some event listeners. And like I said in past projects, I like to put my event listeners at the bottom. So let's just say event listeners. So we have our currency element 1, and we're going to add an event listener. And that's a select list, so it has a change of it. And when that's changed, we want to call calculate. And then I'm just going to copy this down. We need 4 of these. So let's see. The next one is going to be amount element 1, which is the input. So there's actually an event called input in JavaScript, and that will run if we type something in here, which would be a number obviously, or if we go ahead and use the arrows. Okay, so either one of those is going to fire off input, and then it's going to call calculate. Then we have currency element 2, which is a select, so when it changes we'll call calculate. And then we have amount 2. So change that to amount element 2. And that will also call change, alright? I'm sorry, yeah, it'll fire off input and it'll call calculate. So in here, let's just do a console log, and we'll just say console here, and so right away it runs because we called this initially. If I change the currency, you can see the 2 here means it ran again. If I click this arrow, it runs. If I change this with text, it runs. If I choose one of these, it runs. If I change this, it runs. So no matter what we do here, it's going to call calculate. Aside from the swap button, that's going to that's going to do something different. Okay, so let's close that up for now. And then inside calculate, we need to get the values of these currency 1, currency 2 elements, because right now it's just choosing the select box. We want the actual value that's inside. So let's create a variable called currency, just currency 1, and set that to currency element 1 dot value. That'll give us the value. And then we also want the value of currency element 2. Okay, and just to test it out, we'll say console log currency 1 and currency 2. So if we go over here, so USD and EUR, change, there we go, TWD, EUR, good. So the next thing we want to do is actually make our requests. Now, if we look at the API documentation, it's very, very simple. This is one of the easiest APIs to deal with. We just need to call this endpoint with whatever the currency that we want, which is going to be currency 1, right? If we have USD here, that's what we want to get passed in. If we change it to something else, we want that passed in. So this part of it needs to be dynamic. So let's say fetch. And we're going to use a template literal in here, so we're going to use some backticks. That just means we can actually insert variables right into it rather than using like string concatenation. So let's grab this here, this endpoint, paste it in, and then this needs to be, like I said, dynamic. So to use a variable in a template string, we just simply use this syntax, a money sign and then curly braces. And the variable that I want is currency 1, not currency element 1, currency 1, which is going to be the value of currency 1, this right here. Okay, and then this is going to give us a promise back, so we want to tack on dot then res, and we want JSON format, so res dot JSON, and then we get another promise. Okay, and then in here is where we get our data. So we use an arrow function, and let's just for now console log data and see what we get. So we'll go back and let's open up our console. So we get an object with the base, which is basically the currency we're requesting for, which is USD, because that's what we have selected by default. It gives us the date, it gives us the time last updated, and the rates, which is what the most important part of this is. So it gives us the rates for every other country, okay, including the country we actually use, which is the United States, or the currency we used. Okay, so we know that we're getting that data back. So let's go back here, and actually just comment that out in case you want to see what that is another time. And I'm going to create a variable called rate, and we want to get data dot rates. Okay, so data dot rates is this right here, and we want to get whatever the currency of currency 2 is, right? So we have that available to us here, so we're going to use that as an index, currency _2. And then what we'll do is let's do another console log here of rate. Let's see what we get. So we get this value, which is the currency rate for euros. If I choose something else, we're going to get that value, and so on. Alright, so far so good. We get the rate of the selected currency. So now we want to update. Let's actually do the rate element, which is here. So I'm going to take the rate element and let's set the inner text, and we're going to set that to a template string or template literal, and let's say 1, because the default is going to be 1, and then whatever currency 1 is, so currency 1 equals, and then the rate, so the variable rate, which we just defined above, and then currency 2. Alright. Whoa, wait a minute. Why is it in the button? I think I messed something up here. Yeah, this button should have an ID of swap. There we go. The rate is right here. So this div is what we're filling in. So 1 USD equals that amount of euros. So it gives us the rate, but we want to know what is $1 USD in euros, and that we want to display here. So in the calculate function here, I want to go down to the bottom, and let's take the amount element 2 and the value, and we're going to set that. Okay, so we're going to set that to the amount element 1 value, and we just want to multiply that by the rate, and that will give us the correct value. Now I want it to be a decimal with 2 decimal points, so we can use the toFixed method and just pass in 2 here, and then we'll save, and there we go. So 1 USD is 0.90, and if I change this, it'll change that value, and if I change this over here, it'll change the rate, and it'll change that value as well. All right, perfect. So the last thing I want to do is to be able to swap these. So if I want, for instance, euro to be up here and USD down here, I want to be able to do that. So we have this swap element, which is our button, and we need to add an event listener for that. So let's say swap dot add event listener, and it's going to be on click. And when that happens, we'll just run a function. I'll use an arrow here. And then we need a temporary variable to store the value of currency 1. So this will be currency element 1 dot value. And then we're going to set currency element 1 dot value to currency element 2 dot value, because we're just swapping them. Okay, and then we'll set currency element 2 dot value to the temp, where we stored the initial value of currency element 1. So we're just simply swapping them, changing places, and then we'll call calculate. Okay, so now if I click swap, there we go. So now up here is euro, and down here is USD, and it will change the rate and everything. So it shows us the rate here, and then the value. We can change it, swap it again. So pretty cool, very dynamic. Swap that, change that. Awesome. So that's it. So it was a pretty simple project, but it introduced you to the Fetch API, to JSON, to working with a third-party API, and dealing with DOM elements and so on. All right, so I will see you in the next project.